Hi guys, it's me, Chaz HD, and welcome to tonight the qualifying preview for the Australian Grand Prix weekend of 2023. Hope all you guys are well. Obviously, qualifying isn't actually that far away. It is, I think 12 more hours until we get to qualifying in Melbourne. Of course, they are way far ahead in terms of time zone. Yeah, cannot wait to see how qualifying goes down. Qualifying in Melbourne can normally be pretty exciting, especially, when we get certain drivers really pulling out some great performances. It can really make for, a very exciting qualifying session. So I don't think tomorrow is going to be just really boring and, Red Bull, a second out front with, it finishing up in a very likely order, I guess you could say, given what we've seen so far in 2023. So yeah, I think it's going to be, certainly after the two Red Bulls, I think it's going to be pretty mixed up through the field, and we're going to hopefully have an exciting starting grid for the race on Sunday. But yeah, great to see you guys here, no matter what time zone you're in and what part of the world you're from. Hope you're all doing well. And yeah, hopefully you'll join me tonight in previewing qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix. What we're going to be going through in this stream, firstly, we're going to get into the results of Practice 1. Practice 2, we won't be getting into the results or data from that session because it wasn't really a representative session. We had I think the first 10 minutes were dry, and then the rest of the session, it was pretty much just too wet to improve the lap times. So, yeah, practice 2, we're not going to be looking at. We're just going to be looking at practice 1, and really, from a representative standpoint, that's the only session we can look at, data-wise, to get a decent idea of what is going to happen tomorrow in qualifying. So, yeah, that's what we'll be going through in a moment. We'll get into the sector time data from practice 1 and see, what teams are looking good in certain parts of the circuit. And then once we've gone through all of that, I will then get into my final prediction for qualifying and where I think certain teams and drivers will end up. And then after that, obviously, we'll go through all the teams and I'll explain in a bit more detail with each team how I think they'll come to the result that I have predicted. And also, probably around halfway through the stream, certainly once I've got done talking about the top 4 teams, Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes, Ferrari, I will be getting into upgrades because there has been quite a few upgrades for this Grand Prix this weekend. And I do want to get into that in this stream as well. So yeah, we will get into that as well. So plenty coming up with this qualifying preview. And well, let's just get straight into it. So the result of practice 1 was Max Verstappen was quickest on a 1:18.7, almost 4.5 tenths of a second clear of Lewis Hamilton, who had a very good practice 1 in terms of his lap time, even though he had a couple little moments here or there. Max Verstappen had a spin, I think, in practice 1 as well. And practice 1, obviously I didn't watch practice 1 or practice 2 because it was too early in the morning. And I wanted to save myself a bit for, for qualifying in the race. Yeah, if you go look back at the highlights of practice 1, there were so many spins and off-track moments. It was quite a hectic session from all of the teams, and even a red flag because I think the GPS system wasn't working at one point, which is why there was so much traffic in the session as well. With Verstappen's time, though, it is a very quick lap time, a 1:18.7. That's only 9 tenths of a second slower than Charles Leclerc's pole position at this track last year. So, yeah, my guess is, with that being the quickest time of the weekend so far in practice 1, pole position tomorrow, if it is a dry session, which I think it probably will be, pole position should be in the say mid to low 117s. I'd be surprised if it got into the 1 minute 16s, but yeah, a mid to low 117 I think is when or what pole position will be tomorrow. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton was second, Perez was third, Alonso fourth, Leclerc fifth, Carlos Sainz in P6. Ferrari, I've got to say, with their quali speed or their single lap pace, look a bit better than I expected coming into this weekend. So yeah, a bit more positive looking at the Ferrari team. And then Lando Norris in P7, what a practice one session he had. And we'll get into the data in a moment because, yeah, the McLaren in a certain part of the track is actually really, really quick. And they might be a bit of a surprise team in qualifying tomorrow, given what we've seen so far this season with them. And then Pierre Gasly finished up in 8th with Russell 9th and Lance Stroll in P10. And then the rest of the field, Albon, Piastri, Hulkenberg, De Vries, Sargent, Ocon. Ocon, I think, further down the field, not because of pure pace, maybe because he was held up by traffic or had an off-track moment or something that caused him to be a lot slower. I don't think he is genuinely that much slower than his teammate Gasly. And then the rest of the field, yes, Tsunoda, Bottas, Zhou, and Magnussen in P20. And Magnussen, I'm pretty sure he was another driver that had a bit of a eventful first practice session. But let's get into the sector time data from practice 1. So in sector 1, which is mostly about power, I would say, because you've got 2 DRS zones and you've got 2 high-speed corners that, I mean, one of them is flat out and the other one is not flat out, but is pretty fast. It is pretty much about your top speed in the first sector. And yeah, the Red Bull team, very, very quick, a 10th quicker than the next best car, Pierre Gasly, in the Alpine. Charles Leclerc, though, considering Ferrari do tend so far this season to turn their engines down a bit compared to Red Bull and other teams as well, for them to only be 0.2 of a second slower after practice 1 in the first sector, I think it's pretty good. And once they fully turn things up, I don't think Ferrari are going to be that far away from Red Bull. Red Bull are still, as I'll get on to later with the sector time data and my predictions, I still think Red Bull have the best car, even in qualifying trim. But Ferrari are not a million miles away. They're definitely not as far behind as I thought they were going to be, coming into this weekend. Lewis Hamilton, only 0.2 down on Verstappen, just ahead of Alonso. The Mercedes-powered teams, no real surprise that they're just not doing as well in that first sector compared to Red Bull and Ferrari. Alex Albon doing pretty well in the first sector. Tsunoda as well doing pretty well in that first sector. Bit of a surprise that Haas weren't very quick in the first sector in practice 1. Lando Norris, though, and McLaren, you can just clearly see that, yeah, McLaren, because of their enormous amount of drag and coupled with the, less powerful Mercedes power unit, they are really struggling in these high-speed sectors, like I said they would coming into the weekend. I mean, they are nearly 0.3 of a second slower than Pierre Gasly in the Alpine in just the first sector alone. That is a lot of lap time to be losing to a team that is, or should be, relatively on the same level as the McLaren team. Or, McLaren should be relatively on their level at least. And then we get into the middle sector. The middle sector is pretty much flat out except for one corner. That one corner, though, is very high speed. So, yeah, it's pretty much just a full throttle middle sector. And Red Bull, once again, very quick through there. Also, the Williams of Alex Albon, very quick. And as I'll get into when I get to, or get through all the sector time data, get to my predictions, I do think Williams are a bit of a dark horse from what I've seen so far. And I said that coming into the weekend, that with a couple of sectors around this track where, having good top speed is rewarded, Williams, they've definitely got a decent chance of a good race weekend compared to what they had in Saudi Arabia. Gasly doing pretty well in third, Hamilton in fourth, basically a quarter of a second down on Verstappen. Not really a surprise that he was that far down. But if you needed evidence that Ferrari definitely in practice one were not showing from their power unit as much of what they've got this weekend as Red Bull, then yeah, look in that middle sector where Ferrari were exactly 0.3 of a second slower than Verstappen. Ferrari are not going to be that far off in the middle sector tomorrow. They will be within 0.1 of a second in that final, or not the final sector, in the middle sector. So yeah, Ferrari definitely will be a lot quicker there. The Haas looking decent. I still would have expected it to be a bit quicker though in that middle sector. Certainly a bit closer to Alpine as they're, 0.2 of a second slower. Really, they should be Haas in this sector, say 0.1 closer to the Alpine team. Aston Martin, though, yeah, not looking good in that middle sector. It's not really a massive surprise because we know the Mercedes-powered teams do struggle a lot in sectors of a circuit where it is quite high speed. But for them to be 3.5 slower than Red Bull in the middle sector in practice one, and we know Red Bull do tend to not push as hard in practice as Aston Martin do, that is not a good omen for qualifying tomorrow. It really is not. And I mean, they're still slower than Ferrari in that middle sector, despite Ferrari, I'm pretty sure, running a bit less power here on this Friday, because obviously they don't want to stress out their engine too much. So, yeah, Aston Martin are not in a good position, I think, for qualifying. I don't think they're going to be terrible or anything like that, but they are not going to be, I don't think, in that good of a position for the race. What they need to pray for, really, is that we get changeable weather on Saturday for qualifying. If that happens, I think Alonso could be pretty comfortably in the top 3-4 on the grid, but with Ferrari's pace and even Lewis Hamilton's pace, yeah, it looks as though it's going to be a tough weekend for Aston Martin, certainly in qualifying. Tsunoda and the AlphaTauri doing okay. Lando Norris, again, losing so much time compared to Alpine. Quarter of a second to Alpine in that middle sector alone, and it's pretty much just one corner in that middle sector. And McLaren still having massive drag issues. With Alfa Romeo, yeah, a bit surprising they're so far down, but I'm pretty sure Alfa Romeo are not showing, or haven't so far this weekend, as much of what they will have in qualifying. I still don't think they'll be that good, but they're not going to be maybe quite as bad as they looked in Friday practice. So yeah, the middle sector, Red Bull and Ferrari look to be the two best teams, I would say. And then once we actually get to qualifying, I think Mercedes will probably be maybe not the third best team in this middle sector. It'll probably go to Williams, to be honest, because of just how slippery their car is in a straight line. But out of the top teams, Mercedes will be the third best team in this middle sector. And then after that, Aston Martin, yeah, they are going to struggle quite a bit, even compared to Alpine and Haas in this middle sector. So they might have to Aston Martin if qualifying definitely is. And the race, I'm pretty sure, will be dry on Sunday, looking at the weather. Saturday is a bit more, you know, there is a possibility, maybe a 40% chance of rain or 50% chance of rain. You know, maybe it won't, this lack of straight line speed hurt them in qualifying tomorrow. But let's say it is dry for both qualifying and the race. Aston Martin might have to trim a bit of wing off their car just to make sure they're still competitive enough in those parts of the track, because yeah, they're going to be in a bit of a bad shape if you know, if they continue with their current pace in that middle sector. And in the midfield, yeah, Alpine look like maybe not the quickest midfield team, but they look to be pretty quick. Haas look decently quick. But then McLaren, AlphaTauri, yeah, not good at all. The final sector, though, which is really all about downforce, the best sector times by team we got in the final sector are really interesting. McLaren were the quickest team in the final sector with Lando Norris, and by quite a margin of, basically a 1/10.5 over Sergio Perez. And Oscar Piastri as well was not that much, or maybe not that much slower, but he wasn't that far off Norris in Sector 3 in Practice 1 either. I think Piastri was also in the top 5 best Sector 3 times for all of the drivers. So McLaren have got a really good car in that final sector, but because they are so slow down the straights in Sector 1 and Sector 2, they can't show as much of their potential as, with those deficiencies that they do clearly have. Obviously, they've got a big upgrade coming to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which is the next Grand Prix on the calendar. Really hope that those upgrades address, at the very least, the drag issue they've got with this car, because that's probably the biggest problem with the McLaren car that needs to be fixed for the rest of the season, because if they don't fix it, then they're just going to have an underwhelming season compared to what they had last year. But yeah, in the corners, the McLaren car does look pretty good. And then after that, Red Bull and Mercedes and Aston Martin on equal pace, really. So I've got to say, Mercedes and Aston Martin, their pace in that final sector looking pretty good so far. Ferrari, though, poor final sector. 1/10.5 slower than Red Bull in that final sector. And this final sector is really going to be the issue for the Ferrari team, because I think in qualifying, Sector 1 and Sector 2, Red Bull will probably be just about quicker, but it'll be close, maybe a 10th.5 at most, separating them. But when they get into the final sector, that's where I think Red Bull will prove to be just too good. And that's where Ferrari need to focus on improving the balance of their car for this weekend to maybe get on the front row or even contend for pole position. So yeah, that final sector is the issue for Ferrari, which is not necessarily a surprise. I expected that to a degree coming into this weekend's race. The Williams drops off with its pace in the final sector, but it's still pretty good. Actually quicker than Alpine in that final sector. And I've got to say, not quite sure why both Alpines were so slow in the final sector in Practice 1. So I think that might be a bit of an outlier. I think Alpine could probably go, say, a couple tenths of a second quicker in the final sector. So Alpine, I still think, are overall the best midfield team, after obviously the big 4 teams at the minute of Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes, Ferrari. But I think Alpine's gap to the rest of the other midfield teams is not quite as big as I expected it to be going into qualifying. And before we go through all the teams, let's get into my final predictions for qualifying here in Australia. And not quite for pole position, but for the other parts of the grid, I have gone for some surprises. So let's get into that. So my prediction is Max Verstappen to get pole still pretty comfortably from Sergio Perez in second, who will be just ahead of Charles Leclerc third. I think Perez and Leclerc will be very close in qualifying, but obviously in the race, Perez and Red Bull should be quite a bit faster. And then, yeah, Leclerc will be third. Carlos Sainz, I'm going in fourth. I think Ferrari in qualifying trim will absolutely, from what I've seen so far, have the second best car. Lewis Hamilton, I'm going to go in fifth because he's looked pretty quick in the dry so far this weekend. And Mercedes also don't look that bad. They look actually a tad better this weekend so far than I expected them to be. So yeah, I think Lewis Hamilton will be fifth. Alonso, I am going sixth on the grid ahead of George Russell in seventh. And yeah, the lack of straight line speed from the Aston Martin, even compared to the Mercedes team, is what is going to cost Aston Martin this weekend and might cost them a podium even. this weekend, because if this qualifying result was to actually happen, it would be pretty difficult for Alonso to finish in third, because it is still hard to overtake around this Albert Park circuit, even with these cars that could follow and race a lot better. And then I'm going to go with Russell in 7th, Ocon 8th, Gasly 9th, and Lando Norris in P10. And yes, I do not think Lance Stroll will get into Q3 tomorrow because, one, he's not very quick here, never really has been. And secondly, like I said, Aston Martin, with their quali pace, don't look that quick at all. Certainly not as good as Bahrain or Saudi Arabia. So yeah, Aston Martin, a bit more on the back foot than I expected coming into this weekend. And for the rest of the field, I'm going Magnussen 11th, Hulkenberg 12th, Stroll 13th. Bit of a surprise to, I think, many of you that prediction of mine will be, but I've laid out the reasons why I think that's going to happen. Alex Albon, I'm going to go 14th. I would be surprised if Albon could get to, say, 12th or anything like that on the grid, because I just don't think the Williams is quite good enough, especially in that final sector, to really be competing with the Haas's. Piastri, I'm going to go 15th, with Sargent in 16th place. And then the final 4 positions, I'm going to go Bottas, Tsunoda, Zhou, and Nick de Vries. So that is my prediction for qualifying. Let me know in the live chat and in the comment section down below, do you agree or disagree with what I've had to say? What I will do quickly is set up a poll in the chat. And instead of asking you guys who do you think will be on poll, because I think we still know who that's going to be, really, I'm going to ask you guys, who do you think will qualify third tomorrow in Australia? So who do you think will qualify third tomorrow for Australian GP? And the options I will go for will be Leclerc, Sainz, Alonso, and Hamilton. I'll go for as the options. So let me just quickly put these in. And there you go. So make sure, guys, to vote in that poll. And let me know what you think. My prediction for third on the grid will be, or is, Charles Leclerc. But let me know whether you think it'll be Alonso, Hamilton, or if one of the options that you think will be third isn't in that poll, such as Perez or George Russell, drivers like that. But make sure to post it in the chat or the comments section down below. But what we're going to get into now, before I do anything else, is I'm going to go through the top teams and get a bit more into why I think they'll end up with the results I've gone for. So let's go on to Red Bull Racing, who, despite a bit of a messy day, I mean, it was a messy day for pretty much everyone. Yeah, despite the couple spins they had in practice 1, I think it was, they still look, Red Bull, like they've got the best car. The only difference compared to what my thought or expectation was coming into the weekend is that the gap between them and Ferrari, and I always expected Ferrari to be the second best team in qualifying, at least for this weekend's race, the gap between those two teams is a bit closer. I think my original thought is it would be about half a second. And yeah, I think it's about 2 to 3 tenths of a second now. And Ferrari don't look that bad at all. It looks similar, the pace between Red Bull and Ferrari, to what we saw in Bahrain, where Red Bull were just at, a tenth, 2 tenths, even 3 tenths of a second, just too quick for the Ferrari team. And I think that's what's going to be the case in qualifying tomorrow morning. And the real difference maker will be the final sector, because in the first 2 sectors, like I said, even if Red Bull are slightly quicker than Ferrari, it will be really close. But in that final sector, Red Bull will show why they have the best car in Formula 1 and why they are in a position of dominance already, because they still have the best package on the grid. And compared to Ferrari in that final sector, they'll be just too quick. I think through the first two sectors, the gap will probably be about 10th and a half, like I said earlier. But in the final sector, I expect Red Bull to be, say, 0.2 of a second quicker than the Ferrari team. That's what I would expect in that final sector. So yeah, Red Bull, they're still going to be too good. Max Verstappen, I think, definitely gets pole position. Sergio Perez is, a lot of the time, never been that quick here. He wasn't too bad here last year. He finished in second in the race, was only, I think, a 10th or 2, wasn't he? Behind Verstappen in qualifying, so he didn't do that bad, did Perez. But yeah, Max, I'm pretty sure around this track is going to be number 1. And yeah, he should be all good for pole position. And we'll get on to, very soon, a new upgrade to the Red Bull car on the front wing. And yeah, we'll get on to that very, very soon. Let's now go on to the Ferrari team. And yeah, if you're a Ferrari fan, things are certainly looking a lot more positive at the Ferrari team, so far this weekend than I expected. Like I said with Red Bull a moment ago, I expected them to be at best half a second off Red Bull's pace. But from what I've seen of the data so far, and given that Ferrari do tend to not show as much of their hand as Red Bull do on a Friday, because Ferrari are trying to save their power units from, too much stress. I think Ferrari are in a decent position, and a similar position to Bahrain. And I think Ferrari will be definitely faster than Mercedes and Aston Martin in qualifying. I'd be surprised in the dry. I'd be surprised if Ferrari are slower than Mercedes or Aston Martin, because I just think with that Ferrari power unit, once they turn it up to full whack, I don't see how Mercedes and Aston Martin, in those first two sectors, I don't see how they can possibly compete. I just don't see it at all. The final sector won't be great for the Ferrari team, but yeah, those first two sectors should be easily good enough for them to be, really, as long as Carlos Sainz does not turn in a poor performance like he did a year ago at this same track, they should have easily the pace to be locking out the second row of the grid. And given the difficulties overtaking here, they wouldn't have that bad of a chance at all of finishing on the podium. Obviously, they haven't had a podium this season of the Ferrari team. Only one top 5 finish in the first 2 races of the season, which was, 4th place with Carlos Sainz in Bahrain. So yeah, Ferrari looking better. I wouldn't say good necessarily. I mean, if Leclerc can really pull out a special lap and Perez maybe isn't too quick in qualifying, maybe Ferrari can get a car onto the front row. But realistically, 3rd and 4th is where I think they'll be. And that's really realistically where they should aim. And I think that'd be a good result for them. And I think they'd have probably a 50-60% chance at least, despite their race pace issues, of finishing on the podium, because it's going to be tough to overtake, as it even was at this Grand Prix a year ago, despite the track becoming a lot more high speed and these new cars that can follow better. Yeah, it still wasn't that easy to overtake. So yeah, Ferrari, I think, if they can get that grid position, then they should have a decent race on Sunday. But we'll see whether they do translate what I believe is decent pace so far from them. And also, for Mercedes, their pace is also pretty decent as well. They don't look as bad as I thought they would. I thought they would be absolutely the 4th best team, but they look to be pretty much 3rd best from what I've seen so far. I know Alonso was a lot quicker with his lap time in practice 2, but with practice 2, we can't look at that session in a representative way, because I think Alonso was one of the only drivers in practice 2 who set a better lap time than what he did in practice 1. So yeah, I think compared to maybe what Mercedes could have done or what Ferrari could have done or Red Bull could have done, I don't think we can look at Alonso's lap time there as truly representative of how quick Alonso can be and how quick Aston Martin can be compared to those other teams. So yeah, Mercedes looking decent. Lewis Hamilton definitely looks to be the quicker of the two Mercedes drivers. I know he was slower than Russell in practice 2, but like I said, practice 2 was just a messy session and you can't really take much from it. And practice 1, despite maybe not the greatest handling in the world, Hamilton ended up having a pretty good session, finishing up in 2nd place. And I think after the 2 Red Bulls and after the 2 Ferraris, I think Lewis looks pretty likely to be best of the rest. Especially when you take into what we're trying to say. Especially when you take in the fact that Lewis has always been, especially in practice sessions and qualifying around this track, he has always been super, super quick here. He's had, 8 pole positions here in the past. So do not doubt Lewis Hamilton in qualifying around this circuit. Normally things tend to fall apart for him on the Sunday around this track, but on a Saturday, he has wowed us so many times. He really, really has. So, yeah, Lewis Hamilton, I'm going to go 5th on the grid ahead of Alonso and the Aston Martin. And George Russell won't be too far behind. I think he'll definitely be the 2nd of the Mercedes drivers. And like I said, he won't be too far behind. And Mercedes, in qualifying at least, look quicker than Aston Martin. In the race, it might be Aston Martin just about ahead of Mercedes. I'm not quite sure yet as to how that's looking with the race pace so far this weekend. But in terms of qualifying, which of course we are previewing, I think Mercedes have got the 3rd best car. And that is a positive for them because coming into this weekend, like I said, I did not expect them to be the 3rd best team. I thought they'd be definitely the 4th best team and wouldn't be that far ahead of Alpine and would be fighting with Lance Stroll. But yeah, Mercedes look a bit better than that so far this weekend. And finally, we will go on to the Aston Martin team. And yeah, not looking that great at Aston Martin. I know Alonso topped practice 2, and that obviously makes headlines, but when you actually look into the context and all of that, not really representative of how quick maybe they are this weekend. Fernando obviously is super quick around here. He's always been really good around this track, but the Aston Martin car doesn't look to be that quick, at least in qualifying trim. In Sector 1, they are pretty much on par with Mercedes in that sector, and they are clearly slower than Red Bull and Ferrari, which is not a surprise, but yeah, they are clearly slower in that sector. But the problem, as I showed, Sector 2, they were way too slow. They were the 7th best team I showed a moment ago in Sector 3, or Sector 2, sorry, which is pretty much just flat out. That is simply not good enough. If they are that quick or in that position as a team compared to the other teams in the middle sector tomorrow, then Aston Martin are not going to be really anywhere near fighting for 3rd on the grid. They're going to be more so fighting with Mercedes for, say, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th on the grid. And yeah, I think Aston Martin will be just a tad slower than the Mercedes team in qualifying. It will be still pretty close, though, with Hamilton, Alonso, Russell in a similar way to how it was in Bahrain when they were all very close to one another. Lance Stroll, though, hasn't shown this weekend to be looking that quick. And also, like I said earlier, Lance has never been particularly fast around this circuit. So I think he will not make Q3. I think he'll be getting knocked out in Q2. And it should make for an interesting race watching him come back through the field in what should be a much quicker race car for Aston Martin, despite it not being that easy to overtake around this track. So yeah, Aston Martin not looking in that great of a position. And yeah, that lack of top speed, which, I mean, people have already talked about so far, is an issue for them. It really is biting them this weekend. and they need to try and solve that issue, because in terms of pure downforce, Aston Martin have got a good car. There's no doubt about it. They just don't have enough top speed, really, in qualifying or even the race to fight with, Red Bull, of course. But even Ferrari, when it comes to qualifying, are just too fast in the high-speed stuff compared to Aston Martin, despite Aston Martin having, I think, a bit more grip than what they have. So that really needs to be fixed if they can. There has been talk that Aston Martin are going to try, I think, bring upgrades maybe to the rear wing to try and maybe cut some drag from the car. Not sure they've got an upgrade for this weekend. We'll have a look in a moment, but yeah, that is the issue for them this weekend. If they can qualify 5th, though, rather than P6, then that would be, with Alonso, that would be a pretty good result still, because we know Ferrari have got their race pace issues, and Alonso then would be able to maybe not worry that much about the Mercedes cars and then get after the Ferrari cars. But if it ends up qualifying as I predict, then him getting a podium for the 3rd race in a row is going to be quite a bit more difficult and should make for a bit more of an exciting Grand Prix, to be honest. But yeah, those are the top 4 teams, and that's how I think they'll get on in qualifying. Make sure, guys, though, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe for more content like this, because, of course, I've got plenty of content coming your way to cover qualifying in the race this weekend. Tomorrow morning, I will be going live at 5 a.m. UK time. That is 1 hour before qualifying starts, and then we'll do a build-up to qualifying, following on similar lines to what we've done this evening. And then, yeah, qualifying starts at 6 a.m. And then, of course, I do like a half an hour reaction after the session finishes with you guys to the session. And then on Sunday, I'll be going live at 4 a.m. UK time. Firstly, for the race preview until about 5:30 a.m. The race starts at 6 a.m. And then, obviously, we're doing a watch-along for that until it finishes between, 7:30 and 8 a.m. UK time. And then for about 30 to 45 minutes after, I'll be doing a reaction with you guys to the race itself. So make sure to come along for all that content. And remember, I'll be live at 8 p.m. UK time on Monday evening as well to to review all the big talking points from the Australian Grand Prix weekend. So yeah, make sure to come along to that as well. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash that like button. Obviously, it does help the channel grow. We're currently on, 15 likes. Let's try and get up to, 25 likes by the end of the stream if we can. So if you haven't liked the stream yet, then make sure to do so. And make sure as well to vote in the poll at the top of the live chat to let me know who do you think will qualify 3rd here in Melbourne. But for the time being, before I come to you guys in the chat to read out your comments, what I want to get onto now is upgrades. And there has been quite a few. And I just need to find a Twitter account quickly that will help me bring all of the key upgrades to you guys visibly, most importantly. And yeah, it is Albert Fabrega, who is obviously an F1 journalist, has been one for a while. And he, pretty much yesterday was talking about all of the new upgrades for the teams so far, and had a few pictures as well. So let me quickly get this set up. And yeah, let me just get this on screen now if I can. These upgrades, there you go. So this is the first one. This is the new rear wing side plate for Williams. So on the top is the new rear wing, on the bottom is the old one from Jeddah. So on the bottom one, you can see it's just a simple side of the rear wing. But yeah, a very curious and interesting, as Albert says, side plate on the on the edge of the rear wing. Very interesting upgrade. I've not seen something like this for, well, ever, really. So yeah, very interesting upgrade there. And we'll see, obviously, if it does help them. Williams, obviously their car is very slippery in a straight line, but their big issue is downforce. So that really, if they can get more so on top of that this season, and they will have quite a bit of wind tunnel time compared to other teams this year to get on top of that, Williams might be making quite a bit of progress. But yeah, that is quite an interesting upgrade for the Williams team on the rear wing there. We'll see if that helps them this weekend. Let me just quickly go down. Here we go. This is AlphaTauri. They've got changes on the floor tunnel and deflectors on the AlphaTauri. So on the bottom again is what this area of the car looked like just below the side pod in Saudi Arabia. And then you can see the changes with the hands pointing on the top image. So yeah, you can see the shape of all this area looks, well, not all of it, but in certain areas looks a bit different. So they've just reworked it in a different way. Obviously, AlphaTauri have not started the season well. I don't think their issue is necessarily straight line speed. I think it's just, I think the power unit is working fine. I think this AlphaTauri car just isn't efficiently working very well. So I think that's really what they need to work on. And yes, but obviously not been a very good start to the season, with AlphaTauri 9th in the championship. And let's go to the next one. Oh no, gone a bit too far back there. Let me go back down because there's other ones. Here is a new mirror for Alfa Romeo. I can't really see a massive difference here, but I think there is a small difference. Also, the Stake sponsorship is now changed to Kick, which is a new streaming platform. I'm pretty sure Stake owns Kick. So yeah, that's a new thing there. Also this, what's this? I think I saw this earlier. If Twitter will load, it's a new, what does it say? Longer nose and reprofiled wing elements on the Alfa Romeo. So yeah, on the bottom you can see the nose cone, not as long as it is here on the top, which is the new front wing they brought to Australia. And yeah, with the wing elements, they definitely have been reprofiled and are a bit different to what we saw in Jeddah. So yeah, front wing update there for Alfa Romeo. They definitely need to improve their car, because despite scoring points in Bahrain, they, in Saudi Arabia, did not look very quick, and they've definitely taken a step back so far from what I've seen compared to this time last year. Updated Alpine halo deflector. You can see there, obviously, it was in pink in Jeddah, and now it's in black. You can see a very slight difference there. Also, with Alpine, remember, this race is the last race where they'll have the pink livery. They'll be going back to blue in what you call it, in Baku. And here is the new front wing, or the updates on the front wing to Red Bull. So you can see here with the Jeddah picture and the Australia picture, a slight difference, so not a massive difference, I have to say. And then if we come to this, you can see differences, again, slight differences with the side of the front wing from Australia, which is on the left, compared to Jeddah, which is on the right. So Red Bull, a small upgrade, nothing massive. And if it does help them, it'll only help them by like a 1/10 of a second. It's not going to be anything massive. And I think that is everything. So yeah, those are, guys, all of the upgrades this weekend for what? Red Bull, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, Williams, and I don't think, or actually, McLaren had an upgrade, I think, to the diffuser, but I don't think it's a big one. I think it's just a very minor one from the McLaren team. So there you go. Those are all the upgrades for the teams. In Baku, we are expecting quite a big upgrade package from McLaren. Not quite a new car. Andrea Stella, though, was saying that right before the summer break, McLaren are going to be bringing a massive upgrade, which is going to be kind of like, his words, not mine, kind of like a B-spec car. So McLaren are going to change quite a bit this season. Also, there was confirmation from Toto Wolff that Mercedes will not be bringing any upgrades to the car until Imola, which is towards the end of May, where they will be bringing these raft of new upgrades, and hopefully we'll see Mercedes improve quite a bit in 2023. Anyway, let me read out some comments from you guys in the chat, and then we'll move on to the rest of the teams. Hello to everyone, by the way. Great to see you all. Dustin Salinas saying, just going to say it, not sure I'll be awake for this race. It is going to be tough. It is going to be tough. It was better when we had, Australia, Malaysia, and China normally starting off the season like 10 years ago, because you could get into a bit of a pattern. With the way the calendar works at the minute, there's only two early morning races, and obviously Las Vegas is going to be another early morning race because they're going to hold it on Saturday night in Vegas, and it'll be Sunday morning for us in Europe, which won't be great, especially because it'll be freezing cold for all of us in Europe. And what do you call it? You've got the Japanese Grand Prix, but the gap between the Australian and the Japanese Grand Prix is quite big. And obviously Australia, Japan, and for this year Las Vegas, they're the only early morning races that we're going to have. So yeah, it's going to be tough, but I'm going to absolutely make sure that I get up on time and I cover qualifying for you guys. And again, apologies to a certain extent that I won't be doing as long a streams as I did in Saudi Arabia, which were great and I enjoyed them, but because of the timings of the sessions, and because of where I'm at, in Europe, in the UK, and because also the majority of my audience is the UK and the US, it's just not great to be streaming for 6-7 hours, through the night basically and into the early hours of the morning. So yeah, that's why I am not going to be doing that, and I'm going to be doing shorter streams. But when we get back to Baku, those very long streams will return. Absolutely no doubt about that. But let me read a few more comments. Hakan, do you think Alonso can win here? No, I think he'll need quite a bit of luck to win this race. Lab Gorilla, I actually hope your predictions are correct regarding Ferrari. I'm going to guess Leclerc also. My question is, however, what is your opinion on the fact that Ferrari customer teams are already doing an engine change? Well, that is obviously down to the unreliability of the Ferrari engine itself. So, and I think, Haas and Alfa Romeo, the two customer teams, have had to take on, I think, a new ICE I saw, and pretty much a new power unit. Yeah, it's not great. It really is not great, but yeah, the Ferrari engine is just unreliable. There's not much else you can say other than that. And it's going to be an issue for all of the Ferrari power teams this season. And, obviously, Ferrari's struggling with their reliability, but in terms of results, none of those teams are going to be very reliable this season because of that engine, which is, is not in great shape already, and we're not even fully 3 races into the season. Sparky Pete says third place will be Leclerc, although Hamilton can always overachieve and get third. Miss Marquis says, wild, it's 3:30 in the morning here, and yet we have an F1 preview. Thankfully for you, though, qualifying in the race can be on at a good time rather than midnight or between midnight and 6 a.m. Darth Lord Raven says Ferrari always breaks down, or most of the time. I'd bet my money on Alonso. And hello to Scott McDonald in the chat. Thank you, obviously, for all your comments. Great to see you all, as always. One other thing I wanted to say quickly before we move on to the rest of the teams is, yeah, I will be doing the 2 watch-alongs this weekend, obviously, solo, because Nib, my co-commentator, is at the race this weekend, and hopefully has a great time out there. Weather isn't looking fantastic for tomorrow at the track, but on Sunday looks as though it's going to be a pretty hot day, good day to watch, these brilliant F1 cars. So I hope he has a good time out there. And yeah, he will be back, I think, definitely for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which is at a bit of a better time for him. I think the race in Baku at the end of this coming month, which is April, obviously today's the last day of March, the Baku race on the Sunday starts at 12 p.m. here in the UK. And in Australia, I think that'll be, 11 p.m., something like that. So, yeah, he'll definitely be back for Baku. There is no doubt about that. And then, obviously, once we get properly into the European season, he'll be on pretty much all the time. So, yeah, it'll be solo from me for, obviously, quali and the race itself. But let's now get into the rest of the teams, shall we? And obviously, we will start with, if I can get moving here, the Alpine team, who, they still look like they're pretty quick in that midfield pack. Other teams, though, like McLaren and Haas, don't look to be that far away from them at all. McLaren were definitely quite a surprise in practice. Not sure if I, should say today or yesterday, to be honest, because, yeah, it was so long ago already. Practice 1 and practice 2. But, yeah, Alpine, I still think overall have the best midfield car. I think they've got a car that is good enough in all of the sectors. I know in Sector 3 and practice 1, both Alpines were pretty slow, but I don't think that's going to, translate itself into qualifying. I think they'll be a bit quicker in that final sector. They should be, at least. Their car does have quite a good amount of grip. So, yeah, Alpine, I still think, are the best midfield team. My prediction for them is Ocon 8th, Gasly 9th. Gasly had a good day, Friday practice day, but I still think Esteban Ocon will be faster because in the past, Esteban has been pretty quick around this circuit. This time last year, despite Alonso's heroics at times, Ocon was pretty good, pretty consistent. I think Ocon qualified 8th and finished in 7th in this race last year. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure Esteban will be ahead on the grid. And 8th and 9th would be a great result for Alpine, and they'd have a decent chance then, especially if there's a couple of retirements from the top 4 teams, of nicking quite a few points out of the Australian Grand Prix weekend. And let's hope they can have a good weekend. And like I said, this is the last weekend of the pink livery. They'll be going back to blue and black from Baku on. And to be honest, I wish they would keep the pink because it really, I think, looks better, to be honest, with the livery. But yeah, that's what's going to be happening for the Alpine team. Let's now go on to, though, a bit of a surprise package this weekend, which is the McLaren team. Because, we know all about their struggles, really bad straight line speed because the car has way too much drag and aerodynamically just isn't efficient enough. But in that final sector, which is all about downforce, really, McLaren look really quick. Really quick. They look like they are definitely, in that final sector alone, the best midfield team. And they're in there to a certain extent with the front-running teams as well. So there is a good car here, this McLaren car. There is potential here for something, really good. But it just all isn't there yet. And like I said, aerodynamically is quite inefficient compared to, other cars on the grid. Lando Norris looks super quick here. great to see. Obviously, was so quick here last year. He was 4th on the grid and finished 5th in the race. He would do incredibly well to replicate that this weekend, but I think as long as McLaren don't have any issues, keep their noses clean, obviously, in the race, I think McLaren are going to be in a good position this weekend, at least with Norris, who looks to be definitely quite a bit faster than his teammate Oscar Piastri. Of course, it is his home Grand Prix. As soon as I say that, Norris being quicker, here's a picture of Norris going off, I think, in practice 1. Yeah, Lando looks to be quite a bit quicker, and I think he'll be in the top 10. We know how special he is on a Saturday, and we know that, we know around this circuit, like I said, from last year, and even back in 2019, that he is very, very fast around this circuit. And this track, I have to say, is a bit of a driver's circuit where if you are a really good driver, it really does show around this track, more so than the circuits we've been to so far this season. Not Baku, Bahrain, and the Jeddah circuit in Saudi Arabia. And Lando definitely has shown here in the past and so far this weekend that he is very, very good with his speed. So yeah, watch out for Lando Norris. Watch out to a certain degree with Oscar Piastri, but I don't think we should put big expectations on him because I think this is really the first time he's ever driven around here. So it's a bit of a learning experience for the Australian. But yeah, Lando, he'll be the number 1 driver for McLaren this weekend. And I think he will just about, with a superb effort, get into the top 10. Whether he finishes in the points or not is, if that was to happen, is tricky to say. But yeah, I think he will sneak into Q3 and will be one of the drivers of the day tomorrow in qualifying. Just like he was being... slight disconnection there, I think, for a brief second. Hopefully you guys are, unaffected by that. Yeah, the front nose cone a bit longer. I hope that, helps the Alfa Romeo team, but from what I've seen so far, they don't look pretty special. They don't look like they're on really Haas's level. Obviously, another Ferrari customer team. And look like they're going to be fighting really just to get into Q2 with both cars. But my prediction is they will get both cars knocked out in Q1 because I don't think they're as quick as McLaren overall around this track. Or, or Haas, or Alpine, or even Williams, I think, have a better car for this circuit than Alfa Romeo do. So yeah, not good days at the minute for Alfa Romeo. My only hope is that with this upgrade, they do prove me wrong with the front wing and front nose cone. I really hope they do, because if they don't, then it's going to be, for the next few races, quite a tough time for this team, and maybe even quite a tough season. Even though they are, yes, 6th in the championship, I don't think that's truly representative of where they are right now in Formula 1. And we'll now go on to the Haas F1 team, who look decently quick. They look about as quick, to be honest, as I expected them to be. They're not as quick as Alpine, but they are not that far off. But with McLaren in there now, with their, good pace by the looks of it, it definitely hurts Haas's chances of getting into Q3. And they're going to need some pretty special laps in qualifying to get into Q3. It is possible. Kevin Magnussen has always been very quick here. Hulkenberg even has been very quick here in the past. But yeah, Lando Norris in the McLaren so far this weekend has looked very, very fast. So it's going to be really close between Norris, maybe even Gasly, the second of the Alpines in my view. He'll be, and the 2 Haases, and even Lance Stroll, who of course I predicted to not make Q3. So yeah, Haas are going to be right in that fight. And if they are going to score points this weekend, really, they do need to get into the top 10. Because, yeah, I don't see them having spectacular race pace or good enough race pace to be finishing in the points, or definitely confirming that position. So yeah, Haas F1, they'll be right in that fight, but I think they'll just about, because of a great driver performance by Norris, I think they'll just about miss out. AlphaTauri have not had a great day. Their pace doesn't look that good, really. I think all in all, they'll probably have, at best, the second slowest car, but they're going to be right there with Alfa Romeo, and maybe even one of the Williamses trying desperately to get out of Q1. My prediction is both AlphaTauris will be knocked out in Q1 because their qualifying speed so far this season doesn't look to be very good at all. We saw that in Saudi Arabia. They were shockingly bad in qualifying. It improved a lot, though, in the race, their pace. But, yeah, they just don't look over a single lap to have much of anything here, despite the upgrades. And I really hope, by the way, these upgrades do help them with the redesign of the floor tunnels, I think they were called, going towards the rear of the car. But until I see evidence that it has improved the car, can't really say anything more. But yeah, I think both cars knocked down Q1, and I think Nick De Vries will end up at the back because I don't think he's ever raced here before, has Nick, and obviously Tsunoda has, and that's an advantage for Tsunoda that will help him quite a bit. And finally, we will go on to the Williams team, who look like dark horses this weekend in that midfield pack. Kind of as I expected coming into the weekend. Their car in the first and middle sector looks pretty quick. They look like they're right on the pace, really, of teams like Alpine, McLaren, and Haas, and actually are quite a bit faster than teams like McLaren in the first and second sector. The problem is the final sector, they're just way too slow, and that is going to cost them, I think, getting into Q3. Alex Albon, though, he'll be in a decent position. He'll be around, 13th, 14th on the grid. I can't see Albon, though, getting, 11th or anything like that, or obviously any better than P11. I think that would be a bit of a stretch, because, like I said, the Williams in that final sector just isn't quick enough to be maybe getting Albon into Q3. But like I said, in the first and second sector, that Williams is right up there in that midfield as one of the best cars, no doubt about it. And I think for qualifying, as long as Williams can get a decent grid position, like 13th and 14th, 13th and 15th, I think my prediction is 14th and 16th, which even that is not too bad. With the straight line speed they've got, and with having 4 DRS zones, there's no reason why they can't make progress up the field and even maybe contend for a point. So watch out for Williams this weekend. They look really like they could be, similar to McLaren, a real surprise given what we've seen so far this weekend. So yeah, look out for the Williams team. They look pretty good. And I think, that is indeed all of the teams. And I think, guys, I will bring the stream to an end because I've been live for just over an hour. I've gone through everything, of course, I wanted to go through. Thank you guys so much for coming along. Let me just quickly end the poll in chat. And the question I asked you guys, thanks for voting, by the way, 49 votes. I asked you guys, who do you think will qualify third tomorrow for the Australian Grand Prix? Alonso won the vote with 44% of the vote. Leclerc was second with 36%, Hamilton third with 16%, and Carlos Sainz fourth and last with 2% of the vote. And a bit surprising that you guys are going for Alonso, but hey, that's your view. We'll see if you are correct tomorrow. But before I go, guys, reminder of what my schedule, my plan is for tomorrow, qualifying day, and Sunday, obviously, race day. Tomorrow morning, I will be live at 5 a.m. UK time for the qualifying watch along. We'll do an hour's build up. Then at 6 a.m. the session will start. And then obviously finish around 7 a.m. And then I'll do a reaction for half an hour or so after the session finishes. And then on Sunday morning, I'll be live at 4 a.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts, for the race preview up until, say, 5:30 a.m. 6 a.m. UK time, the race starts. And then for about 30 to 45 minutes after, I'll be reacting with you guys to the events of the Australian Grand Prix with a weekend review on Monday night at 8 p.m. UK time as well. So make sure, guys, to come along to all of that content. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Before you go, guys, if you haven't already, don't forget to smash the like button. Let's try and get it up over 30 likes before the end of the stream. And also, make sure to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. And don't forget to join my Discord server. Link below in the description for more content like this. But until my qualifying watch-along stream, guys, which starts in... how many hours? 10 hours, or just under 10 hours from now. Until then, guys, 5 a.m. UK time. Make sure you can be there if, obviously, you're, if you can still survive to that time, or you can wake up at that time. Until then, guys, the qualifying watch along, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.